I'm going to try to not let my work computer fall off of this platform, but I am going to use this platform because it's going to be a lot easier than using paper. Okay, I'm just going to jump on in here and pose a few questions, and I want your feedback. So, I'm going to say some words, and by the way, these are going to be very leading questions. You're not really going to have a choice on what your answer is. I'm going to say some words, and you tell me whether you feel like you want it more or less or the same amount in your life. Okay? So, joy. Do you want more or less or the same amount in your life?
More.
Great. Contentment. Do you want more or less or the same amount in your life?
More.
Wonder. Would you like more or less or the same amount of wonder in your life?
More.
Not so sure about wonder. That's okay. Purpose. Would you like more or less or the same amount of purpose in your life?
Yes. Same amount.
Okay. So I know that we can all think of a time when we have felt these emotions, and maybe we were 5 years old opening up Christmas presents, or maybe we were 25 taking an awesome trip, or maybe it was yesterday if you bought a house. Congratulations. We all love feeling those emotions, right? And as a Christian, if someone was coming to you and saying, hey, I'm looking for joy and freedom and contentment and wonder and purpose, where would you tell them to look? Like, what steps would you tell them to take? And that's actually, I want your answers on that one too. So if someone came to you asking where to find those things, or where, this is not a trick question, what would you tell them to do? Come on, hit me with your classics. Jesus, that's great. Specific things though.
Bungee jump.
Bungee jumping's fun. Anything. Where would you tell someone to look for joy, contentment, all those things? What would you tell them to do?
Relationships. Like friendship relationships.
Okay. You guys stew on that. Next question. When is a time when you guys have felt on fire for God in your life? A time, a season, an era, a summer, whatever. When was a time that you felt on fire for God in your life? Huh? Late teens. Okay.
Counselor at summer camp.
Counselor at summer camp.
Mission trip.
Mission trip. Canvassing.
Same.
Okay. Great. I'm going to get back to that feedback in a little bit. Thank you for your answers. And we're just going to move on to learning a little bit more about me. So most of you probably don't know me, but I'm Cy Gallimore. I spent 20 years of my life living in Northeast Tennessee in the sticks, and the type of place where everyone's really nice, and everyone has a jar of sweet tea in their fridge, and your neighbors are your friends. In fact, my neighbors were my best friends. I had two sisters, and they were cool, I guess. But the neighbors were boys, and they were my age, so it was perfect. So they were my best friends, and it was like having de facto brothers. And Blake and I always used to try to figure out ways to have fun outside, and usually disadvantaging his younger brother, Brandon. So all of the games we would play usually ended up with Brandon crying at the end, but we had a blast. So on one particularly eventful day, we had already been playing with Brandon and accidentally flipped his four-wheeler onto his leg, and then later Blake accidentally shot Brandon with an arrow in the same leg, and so we were banned from playing with Brandon anymore that day. And so Blake and I were like, man, what are we going to do if we don't have Brandon to pick on? And so we started thinking of some things, and I thought back, like an idea popped in my head, because I remembered a time when I was at the Greens house. I don't know how many of you know the Greens. They live probably 10 miles down the road. But I was at the Greens house, and we were in their backyard, and Matt and Will were hitting flaming golf balls into a lake behind their house. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. It was dusk, it was really beautiful, and just flaming golf ball after flaming golf ball going like reflecting over the water. It was like very peaceful. And I was like, Blake, we should try this. And Blake was all about it, because Blake was a really good golfer. Like even at, I think we were probably 11 or 12, and he ended up playing golf at every single level. Really, really good golfer. So I thought this was probably not that dangerous, even though we had no water to hit golf balls into. So we grab a cup full of gas and a golf ball and a golf club, and we soak the ball in gas for a little bit, pull it out, light it on fire. Blake steps up and goes, and it was a beautiful shot, but unfortunately the ball immediately goes out. Like the flame is out immediately, because I guess physics. I don't know how Matt and Will did it, honestly, because then we tried again, We soaked the golf ball again in gas for longer, and then we soaked the head of the golf club in gas for a while, and we lit both of them on fire, and then we're like, okay, this is the time. And it goes flying. Another great shot, but unfortunately, the ball immediately goes out again, and the golf club, it stayed lit for a little bit longer, probably because of the grass that we had lit, but the golf ball was not cooperating. So we went into the family's kitchen, into that one drawer, and I feel like every family has this drawer that just everything is in. So we're like combing through batteries and grocery lists and like Band-Aids and random stuff, right? And we find this square, and this square has Velcro on one side and is sticky on the other side. It's like a dream come true. So we cut this thing up into tiny pieces and stick it to the golf ball. So now we have some fuel. So we put the golf ball back into the gas for a long time. We put the club head back into the gas for a long time. And then we pulled them both out, lit them both on fire, and then Blake was like, "Si, it's your turn." And I was like, "Sweet, I've played putt-putt, this is easy." So I step up with not a putt-putt club, and I take my swing, and I hit it, and I actually made pretty good contact. The ball went really far. It just went really that way. And unfortunately, our neighbors, it was a very dry summer, and our neighbors were trying to grow grass in this one 3x3 little plot, very small area, and so they had straw down. And the straw was right next to a wall, like a fence, that was old and wooden and very dry. And the fence is attached to a tree that is old and wooden and very dry. And so we didn't even notice at first, but the straw catches on fire immediately. It's a long ways off. We're not really that worried about it. And then we notice the fire starting to grow. And we're like, oh, we should run over there and try to stomp it out. So we're running, but it's a long ways away. The fence is starting to get black because of the char and whatever. And then, I don't know if you've ever seen a really angry bald guy, but my neighbor's dad walks from around the corner, and his head is like a tomato. And he has a hose, and he sprays out the fire, and immediately looks at us. And remember, we'd already flipped a four-wheeler on Brandon's leg. We'd already shot him with an arrow. So this was 3 strikes, probably 10 strikes. And he looks at us, and I immediately ran home. So, why in the world am I telling you this story? Stay with me here. So I asked those questions that I just asked to you a second ago. I asked them on Instagram, and I got pretty similar answers. You guys didn't really answer the first question, but I got answers from the Instagram people, so it's okay. And I had said, what would you tell someone, right, that was looking for joy, contentment, purpose, all those things? And your answers were: pray, spend time in the Word, listen to podcasts, dive into church history, nature, music, okay? Those were what everyone said they would tell someone who was looking to get on fire for God. That's what you said you would tell them to do. Then I asked, what time or season in life did you feel like your faith was on fire? And the answers were very similar to what you guys just said right now. You said camp. You said a mission trip. You said when you were a strong faith community, when you were serving, when you had a supportive small group, and when you were doing student missions. Do you see the disconnect? On one hand, your head is telling you the things to stay on fire for God is praying, read the Bible, nature, music, all that, and that's not wrong. But then the times when you actually felt on fire, you were serving. Camp, student missions, mission trip, small groups, faith communities, whatever. And my hunch is, and this is how I'll tie it very loosely back to the story, I apologize. If you have a cup full of gasoline, I think that's your prayer. I think it's ready to soak whatever your foundation is, whatever your tools are, whatever your golf club and golf ball are, and it's just ready to ignite because it's saturated in prayer. And I think Word and time in nature and music and those things, I think those are your foundation. I think that's your golf clubs and golf ball. I think that's the foundation of your faith and beliefs, right? I think it's hard to stay lit. This might be a little polarizing. I think it's hard to stay lit just with prayer and the Word. I think service is your sticky Velcro that keeps your flaming golf ball of faith lit. You said it yourself, the times in your life when you have felt like your faith was on fire, you were serving via camp, missions, small groups, faith communities, etc. It's the sticky Velcro. So, what is the sticky Velcro?
Service.
Service. Okay, so now it's time to get a little bit vulnerable. I'm going to tell you why I'm passionate about this topic and why I even offered to Chandler to talk about this. And I'm not sure if any of you will be able to relate to this, but I actually think I failed one of God's callings in my life, at least at a specific time. I was in college at Southern, and we were having a Vespers, a lot like this. And the speaker's message was titled Go, and it was one of the most inspirational talks I've ever been to, bar none. And I came away feeling really passionate, and at the end of the talk, they were like, hey, if any of you were like impacted by this, come downstairs to this classroom, and we're going to talk about what next steps might look like. And I was like, cool. So I went down there with like 100 other people. So a lot of people were impacted by this talk and went down compelled and feeling like really energized, right? And everyone walks in this room with all this energy, and we sit down, and we're motivated, and we're excited to see what's next. And then the leaders there put on this like super boring PowerPoint. I mean, like instant regret. Everyone in there went in with all of this energy, and just with every, next slide please, like you could just feel the energy getting sucked out of the room. And I was like, man, what a missed opportunity. Like there's 100 people down here that are super excited and motivated to go, and instead we're just watching a PowerPoint. And at one point they opened up the floor to like anyone's responses, and we're like passing around a mic, and I might not seem like it because I'm standing up here talking now, but in those situations I'm fairly reserved. Like I'm not trying to make waves or anything. But I got the mic and I felt, I don't know. I was just feeling ballsy or rude or something. And I stood up and I was like, what are we doing? I was like, these people came down here for a reason. We were all ready to go. We were feeling engaged. We wanted to be enabled to go. That was the point of coming down here. And instead, we're just like watching this PowerPoint, and everyone's just like quiet, but like some people around me were low-key like trying to clap, but then it was awkward. And then the people at the front were all like, man, this guy just roasted what we're doing down here. But this one youth leader that was standing up there looked at me, and he like, I think heard me, and he nodded, and he turned off the PowerPoint, and he grabbed a notebook, and he ripped out a sheet of paper, and he handed it around the entire room. And it said, everyone that's interested in figuring out what the next steps look like, put your name down. That next week, on a Wednesday night, which is like the worst time to try to plan something in college because everyone's got intramurals and extracurriculars and studying and whatever, all that, 50 people showed up to this meeting, which I think tells you how much people were feeling like we gotta do something. 50 people showing up is, I think, pretty impressive. And so they all come in, and the youth leader sets us up in this giant circle, and we're sitting, looking at each other, and he opens the whole thing up and just says, so what do you guys think the next step should be? And instantly, everyone in that circle, probably because I was like the rude guy that started this whole thing, looked at me. And in that moment, I'm like, I feel like I need to lead this. I feel like I'm busy and don't want the responsibility. And so everyone's looking at me, and I looked down. And that came out of nowhere. I feel like there was like this pause, and then the youth leader, I think, realized, all right, well, I guess we're gonna see what we can get out of this anyway. And he broke us up into small groups, and we all talked. It came to nothing. We left, really didn't do anything. The next week, 30 people showed up. And again, it really amounted to nothing. And I was like, well, I think I just failed this. I feel like I should do something. So I reached out to some church leaders. I wrote out what I thought, like I envisioned this thing should look like. And I went and talked to some of the church leaders. And I was like, hey, can I get up in front of Vespers or at church, like before the service or something, and just like promote this and try to get people like excited about it? And they were like, no, if you want to promote it at Southern, it has to go through like Southern's mission, like missionary thing. You got to go through like campus ministries. And I was like, well, I don't think it should be campus ministries because I might be encouraging people to go serve on the Sabbath and not go to church. And that might be like waves. I don't know. And so I was like, I think it should be like a people-led thing, not like a school-led thing. And instead of finding a way around it, I was just like, I tried, didn't work, and I let it go. And the next week, the group met one last time, and like 15 people showed up. And I didn't say anything again, didn't share my vision, didn't share what I wrote, and that was it. And so that haunted me for like the better part of really the rest of that semester. And I was like, all right, I feel like I need to serve God in a big way. And so whether this is the right motivation or not, I decided to do student missions. And within a few months, I was on a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean called Pohnpei. And my time in Pohnpei was life-changing. But after the first couple of months, I was feeling a little frustrated because I felt like that everybody that went on these mission trips had these super cool stories to share about like a miracle or how God worked really tangibly in their life. And I was like, man, I don't know where God's at. I'm just teaching, I'm grading, I'm lesson planning, I'm like having some fun on the side, but I feel like I haven't had any major God moments. And in fact, things had kind of gone from bad to worse. I had, like, the principal of the school is a really good guy, but the type of guy you don't want to disappoint. And for some reason, every time the guy walked into my classroom, it was chaos. It was just super unlucky. Like, normally well-behaved kids would just do absolutely ridiculous things. Like, the first time he walks in, a couple kids had snuck chalk into the classroom and, like, went to go draw on the white cinder blocks of the classroom wall as the principal was walking in. Like, I didn't have time to react. And then the last time the principal walked in, which they kind of straw that broke the camel's back, this kid, I guess, had like gotten a Sharpie thrown into his eye, and then like some other kids were like, "Oh, we gotta like wash it out." And so they're like, "What do we have?" Like, coconut juice. Great! And they like start pouring coconut juice into this kid's eyeball on the floor of the classroom, and the principal walks in, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, this guy thinks I have no control over my students, when in reality that was not the case. So I was like, I am absolutely going to over-prepare for my next class period because if the principal walks in, this is not happening again. So this was a Thursday when I made that decision. I was a high school history teacher there, civics, and I coached the debate team. And the debate team didn't really have any like aspirations because in the past they had never won anything, never really done anything. There's no internet at the school. There's no library at the school. There's no real way for the kids to do research to win a debate. So like your only option is really to do interviews with different people around the island. But you can't go do interviews if you don't have a budget, and we didn't have a budget. So we had found out there was going to be a debate competition, the winners of which would get scholarships and potentially be able to leave the island. And that's a really big deal for a little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. People don't ever leave. So I was like, man, that would be cool for our kids. I should probably, as the debate coach, take them to an interview. So I take them to this interview at the Department of Justice on the island. Great interview. It's good. The kids learned a lot, felt more prepared for the debate. And we're on our way back, and in a colossal feat of bad luck, once a year, they shut down one road on the island to do a roadblock and check everyone's license and registration, all 364 or 5, depending if it's this year, 364 days of the year, no cops are pulling anyone over ever. No one drives with their license, nothing. So I didn't have my license on me. I got a van full of kids. I get pulled over by the cops. I get a ticket for $35. Sounds cheap. I got paid $60 every 2 weeks. So with $35 being gone, and then $10 for the gas that I paid, I got $15 left to live on for the next 2 weeks. And that's fine, we can make it happen, because Jesus. But that meant that I didn't have any money to take the kids on any more interviews. I didn't have a way to set them up for success for this debate thing, at least for like a paycheck or two, which would be a month, and the debate competition's in a month and a half. So I was like, man, I'm gonna have to break this bad news to these kids that I am not going to be able to take them to any more interviews right after they were just super pumped about it. Oh, and then on top of that, I have to present my license in court to be able to prove that I actually do have a driver's license. But my wallet disappeared, So I had no way to show the court that I had my license, which technically meant that I could spend a day in jail if I didn't present it, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. But even so, the principal heard about it, and he was really angry. So now this is on a Friday. I'm like, okay, Saturday night, Sunday, I am preparing my lesson. It is going to be beautiful. My classroom is going to be clean. I'm drawing murals on the white cinder blocks over what the kids had drawn, and I'm making these beautiful things to be able to teach them. And I was like, it's going to be awesome. Sunday, we spend most of the day looking for my wallet, me and the rest of the student missionaries. None of us can find it. We can't figure out what happened. We think maybe it fell through the floorboards of our rusty van on our way to church or something. So it's just gone. Monday rolls around, and if things can't get any worse, the accreditation team comes. Out of the blue. No one knew it was coming, but it's school accreditation time. They do it every 3 years. Happened to be this year, happened to be this day. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. But the principal is like worried and wants to shepherd them to the right classrooms, right? So he's like, let's take them to the biology and math teacher's classroom. And I was like, that's fine. I know you think I'm a terrible teacher, but I'd rather them go there anyway. But I think the lady got lost in our 4-room school and ended up in my classroom. And so now I'm really stressed. I got this lady in there that's going to decide the fate of the school. But I wasn't as worried about it as I normally would be because I knew that I had over-prepared for this Monday. So at least we had that going for us. So this lady sits in the classroom. She sits for one class period. And she sits for another class period. And that second class period happened to be where I had 3 of the debate team members in that class. So now was my time to break the great news to them that we weren't going to be able to go on any more interviews. And I pull them aside after the class is over, and I'm like, hey, really sorry, but this is the case, whatever. And they're bummed. Long story short, accreditation lady leaves, goes back, gets us extra funding for our debate team. I'm getting emotional really randomly. Our kids win the state competition, they use the extra funding to go to the national competition, win the national competition. 2 of them got college scholarships. My wallet just showed up on my bed right after we prayed in our little family room area, and just total miracle. And all of this happened without me even serving the way that I should have been serving, and me feeling selfish about why haven't I had this experience yet. And it really was God using the crud and bad situations that led me to overcorrect in a way that he used to solve a problem I didn't even know could be solved, getting kids a future off the island, and was generous enough to be like, I'm going to give Sai a miracle and be like, hey, I'm with you, just for good measure. And none of it was because I was serving him properly. It was actually the opposite. But this is my second point. Putting yourself in a position to serve puts God in a position to have to come through for you. Putting yourself in a position to serve puts God in a position to have to come through for you, because you aren't going to do it perfectly, and he's going to have to step in and make the difference for you. So, quick recap. So far we have talked about the role of service in keeping our faith on fire. Sticky Velcro. And we've also talked about the role of service in creating space for God to work tangibly. And now I'm going to take this a little deeper, and I don't know how I feel about talking about this story, because there's a couple people that probably feel it. Did any of you know Will Green? So Will was the Green's oldest son, and he was all around one of the best people I've ever known. And ever since I was a kid, I looked up to him a lot. And Will was known for a lot of things, like rodeos and wrestling alligators and fishing for sharks, and especially for being a world-class wakeboarder. And I got to see Will about a day and a half before he died, and I got to give him a hug. And we had one of those moments where we said, see you later, but we didn't realize that actually meant heaven. And 48 hours later, they told us that Will had died. And I was pretty torn up, just because I feel like Will was low-key someone that I was wanted to be. And so I left the room where they gave us the bad news and just kind of started walking. And I wound up in the woods. And I had my Bible and my notebook with me because we were at camp. We just come from morning worship. It's a terrible time to tell people about something like that, by the way, just in case you're ever in that situation. And so I had my Bible and my notebook, and I kind of felt like throwing them, to be honest. And then I remembered that, yes, Will was a great lassoer, and he was a great wakeboarder, but he was a lot more than that. Will was thoughtful and considerate and kind and honest and selfless. And he always went out of his way to spend time with God in the morning. And in that moment, only out of respect for Will, I opened up my Bible. And it fell open to Matthew 14. And if any of you have your Bibles, or that little app on your phone, feel free to join me. I'm not just going to straight up read it, but we'll run through Matthew 14. So the story begins with John the Baptist getting beheaded. I opened my Bible after just hearing someone died, and it's someone dying. And I don't know if you guys know, but John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. So it says the disciples told Jesus that, hey, your cousin's dead. And Jesus wants to go up into the hills to pray and be alone. And that's relatable. If you've ever lost someone, you know how isolating it feels. But the crowds heard where Jesus was going and followed him, which is horrible timing. At least that's how you and I would react, because it's really hard to want to be around people when something like that's going on. But in verse 14 of chapter 14 of the book of Matthew, it says, Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat and had compassion on them and healed their sick. And apparently he did this all day long, because the very next verse says, that evening, the disciples came to him and said, hey, send all these people home because they need to eat. And Jesus says, well, you feed them. And they were like, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. Boom, feeding of the 5,000. So now, surely, Jesus has earned some time to be alone, right? But then it says in verse 22, immediately after this, Jesus tells the disciples to get in a boat and go to the other side of the lake. While Jesus is going to send home 5,000 people that just saw him do a miracle. My guess is they weren't in too much of a rush to leave. So one man who just performed a miracle is sending 5,000 people home, and then, only then, does it say that Jesus finally got a chance to go off and be alone and pray. But he didn't even get to do that for very long. Because in verse 24, it says, meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, far away from land, and strong winds had arisen, and they were fighting heavy waves. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came walking toward them, walking on the water. So, even now, in the state that he's in, Jesus takes an opportunity to build the disciples' faith. And then in verse 34, it says, after they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret, and when the people recognized Jesus, news of his arrival spread. They brought all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. Let's recap. Jesus starts his day finding out his cousin died. He heals people all day. He feeds a city. He sends them home. He walks on water. He runs on no sleep. He immediately starts healing everyone when now he lands at a new city. So here I am, reading this. Will just died. And it hit me that if Christ is my example, I need to serve through my pain. And at the time, it's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to go home. I was at camp. The last thing I wanted to do was go back to my 7, 8, and 9-year-olds that were wetting their beds. Just didn't care, honestly, at all. And actually, in some ways, going back to work felt almost dishonoring to Will, to not go and have that isolating, grieving process. And I did struggle with that over the next few weeks. But that mindset was a game changer for me, in that Jesus is my example, and if Jesus is my example, when he was broken, he served people all day long, all night long, and then all day long the next day. And I can't do that, but I can try. And I think there's something to that. So now, we've talked about the role of service in keeping our faith on fire. We've talked about the role of service in creating space for God to work tangibly. And now we've talked about the role of service as a framework to approach even the difficult times in life. So if you're looking for a missing piece in your life today, and I think we all are, it's possible that your missing piece is service. Some of us right here, right now, are feeling a little bit down, or have been, and are feeling frustrated, or just some version of not being content. And some of us thought we were going to feel passionate and purpose in our jobs because we spent a bunch of money going to school to do it, and we don't. And some of us thought that we would feel contentment when we finally got to stop renting and buy a house, and we don't. And some of us were pretty sure we'd feel freedom if we left the legalism of the church for a little bit, and we don't. And some of us thought that we would feel wonder again when we finally went on that trip, or when we bought that one item. But it wasn't what we thought it would be. So what's missing? And that's a rhetorical question because I think you already answered it. You said it right from the get-go. The times that you have felt the most purpose, the most contentment, the most passion, and the most wonder in your life were the times that you put yourself in a position to serve. So maybe we aren't being called to find our ultimate purpose through our job. Maybe our job is a means to be able to pursue our passions through service outside of work. Maybe we're not feeling the confidence and contentment because we're just going to church and going to Jesus, looking for them to satisfy us like a vending machine. Let's stop fooling ourselves into thinking that service is such an awkward inconvenience that it's not worth doing, when it's what has the potential to provide you with all the stuff that you're looking for. You're looking for purpose, and you're looking to feel content and at peace, and you're looking for passion and wonder, and you're staring it in the face. You know it. You've experienced it, you told me. And maybe the reason that we've not made it more a staple in our lives, like praying or reading the Bible is because we think of service as passing out glow tracts, or going door to door and being really awkward and trying to force Jesus on people. And that's not how service has to look. God created man and it was good. He created us to live in a world with unique talents and abilities. And he created us to live in a world of giving and service and community and doing it our own way. Our DNA is service. It's who we are as creation. I know sin messes us up, and I know our hearts are messed up. But I really believe that God's original build of man includes a DNA of service. And if you read the stories in the Word, you can quickly realize, and this is why I said what I said earlier, that I think that you can lose your way just praying and reading the Bible. If you read the stories in the Word, especially the Old Testament, you can quickly realize that so many Christians can pray and read the Bible and eventually lose what Christianity is supposed to look like. That's what happened by the time Jesus came to earth. Look at the Pharisees of Jesus' day. These were the religious leaders. All they had was the Bible and prayer, right? And yet, they had misinterpreted it so bad to the point of telling people not to serve others because it might make them unclean or break the Sabbath. They had misinterpreted it so bad that, and Gio shared this with me a couple months ago, and I think it really sunk in for the first time. They misinterpreted the word so bad that the word had to become flesh to show us what the word was supposed to look like. Yes, Jesus preached and prayed, but the word becoming flesh, Jesus becoming flesh, was an action to demonstrate. And the demonstration was a perfect life of service and building communities. Philippians 2 verse 3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others above yourself." And Romans 13 verse 8 says, "Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." Fulfilled the law by loving others, fulfilled the word. The same word that had to become flesh to show us that fulfilling the law truly means, what the law truly means. And he showed us that it means service. He showed us that love is an attitude that reveals itself in action. Love is an attitude that reveals itself in action. Service is the best, most active version of love. I think I've officially beat a dead horse. But just to make sure, The sticky Velcro to our relationship with God is
Service.
if we're looking for purpose, joy, and contentment, we should engage in
Service.
If we want to see God move tangibly and grow our faith, we should probably start doing some
Service.
If we're dealing with crud in our lives and we are called to imitate, we should imitate Jesus through
Service.
And Jesus becoming flesh looked like
Service.
Okay, I'm going to close by reading you just an excerpt of what I wrote when I felt God calling me at Southern. Because I never really shared it anywhere anyways, and because I do think it can be somewhat adapted for you and me tonight. So it's called The Active Church. The active church has no pastor, owns no organ, collects no tithe, and has no building. It's not an official church because church isn't a building, it's a people. And the active church is simply people who participate in a movement from the pew to the sidewalk. We're suffering as a society from a general sense of apathy toward Christ, toward any devotion to him, and toward even hints of religious topics of conversation with people that aren't believers, but we're in the wrong time of history to not be caring. So what does it look like? How do you reach an apathetic people? I envisioned hundreds of people, church members, community members, students, families, anyone and everyone, all taking time to show the next person that you care. They like donuts, get them Krispy Kreme. They're going through a tough time, send an encouraging text. She's feeling stressed, give her a flower. He always needs to borrow paper, buy him a notebook. The point is simply to care. You can reach the disabled, you can volunteer at homeless shelters, you can sing at the hospital, you can roam the streets of downtown Orlando giving away backpacks. If even 50 people did small things like that every week, we could transform the attitude in our communities. This type of mission is as true to Christ's example as there is. Jesus is our example, and he didn't sit in pews. Jesus went to where the people in need were, and he met them there. One of my favorite books is called What Difference Do It Make? And this quote from it hit me like a ton of bricks. If all the Christians, and I mean all of them, got out of the pews on Sunday and into the streets, we'd shut down hunger, we'd shut down poverty, we'd shut down loneliness, and the very notion that God didn't exist. We'd shut down the very notion that God didn't exist. Be an active person, be an active Christian, be the active church. There's probably not a real clean way to end this talk, and I think that's okay because I'm going to ask you to do something with me. Tonight, we are going to pack backpacks. Tomorrow, we're going to deliver them. And I think that's a perfect appetizer for what all of us need to start thinking about. So here's my challenge to you. On Sunday, I want all of us to set aside some time from noon to 3 o'clock, wherever you are, whoever you're with, even if you're by yourself, and just take 30 minutes to an hour, somewhere in that window, and just map out things you're passionate about and figure out a way to serve with it. Okay? 30 minutes to an hour between noon and 3 o'clock on Sunday, we are going to game plan how we're going to serve in the specific way that God built us to serve. I don't know how many of us are in this room, but however many of us there are, that could be a huge ministry or ministries. Maybe you're really good at crocheting. I don't know. Or maybe you are really passionate in helping people that are outside the community and they move here and you want to help them just get acclimated and join in the community. And maybe you have a deep desire to help single moms in all the stuff that they're struggling with. I don't know. But the point is, find something you're passionate about, and then figure out a way to intertwine them. Like imagine a single mom moves to Orlando, now all of y'all can get together and be like, I'm gonna crochet this stuff, I'm gonna get her plugged into this, I'm gonna help her with all of these needs that she might have with her baby, whatever it is. And now you guys have a full service ministry just because you each were pursuing something you're passionate about. There's so much power and so much potential in how each of us can pursue our own callings to service in the unique talents and interests and desires that God has given us. And then just imagine how much fun our conversations are going to be at church when we're able to talk to each other about how God's been working in those. That gets me pumped. So I'm going to end this by reminding you all again, the sticky Velcro to our relationship with God is
Service.
If we're looking for purpose, we should engage in
Service.
If we're looking for joy, we should engage in
Service.
If we're looking for contentment and confidence, we should engage in
Service.
If we want to see God move tangibly and grow our faith, we should probably start doing some
Service.
If we're dealing with crud in our lives, we can get through it and imitate Jesus through
Service.
Jesus becoming flesh looked like.
Service.
And I'm running over, so we should probably wrap up this.
Service.
All right. All right, so again, Sunday, 12 to 3 o'clock. Game plan for 30 minutes about how you're going to serve. And in the meantime, let's go pack some backpacks.